Good. Right. Well, welcome to the Brew Odyssey podcast. It's really good to have you on. We start as we always start. Do you want to give the audience an introduction into who you are, who you're representing, and then we'll get into the fun stuff?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm Amir Montazer. I am the founder and director of Etude Coffee. Etude Coffee is a specialty small batch coffee roasters based in England, in east of England, and we focus on high quality specialty coffee. We also have two coffee shops currently. One is based in a roastery, which is in near Bungay in Norfolk, Suffolk border. And there's another one in South London.
I know the area very well. I've been coming back and forth to all my dad's side of the family are in Norfolk, so I've been coming down to Norfolk all of my life. It's a lovely part of the world. So it's not particularly well known for specialty coffee, if you forgive me for saying that. In terms of you look at London, you look at Manchester and Bristol and everything that goes on. What made you set up down there, and what's the story behind setting up Etude?
I think you're quite right. And I think that's related to the story of why we opened the London shop really. Uh, so I ended up here completely by chance, like life, brought me here. It was the middle of pandemic. I decided to move out of London, and I ended up moving to New Buckingham, which is a small village, Norfolk. So just wanted to try the village life, really. I got bored of that after a little while, and now I live in Norwich, which is a slightly bigger city compared to a village. But it was completely by chance. And then I happened to have time and resources to start roastery, which I always wanted to do. And it was the right time and the right place. So that's how it happened. And we found the right audience, to be
Yep,
honest.
yep.
Uh, it's absolutely true. There are not many specialty roasteries, especially cafes around here, but I think there is an audience for specialty coffee everywhere.
Yeah, it's I'm a very big craft beer nerd, and I hate the term craft nowadays. I'm not really sure what it stands for. And we saw a massive boom in the noughties and kind of early tens of beer, and I think coffee's followed a very similar trajectory. It's incredible now how many independent shops are popping up in every city. And I first ran this podcast in 2019, 2020, and finding coffee roasts online was really difficult. You had Kiss the Hippo, you had the big boys who were kind of there and there, and now it just seems to have blown up in terms of people wanting to do amazing things. So, what sparked your love for coffee? Full stop. Like, where did that kind of love for specialty coffee begin?
Well, I have to go back around 15 years, really. That's when I started getting into coffee very seriously. So I studied software engineering in university, and right after university, I started a job in software engineering. And as you might know, software engineers tend to drink a lot of coffee because that's our fuel. And then one day I remember I was like, I drink this every day. Uh, I have no idea about it. And I was like, I need to learn more about this. That week, I went to the coffee shop, my local coffee shop that I used to go a lot. I asked the barista, I was like, can you teach me a little bit? I'll pay you. Teach me a little bit about coffee. And he said, come back at night because like coffee shops in my home country in Iran, they're open very late. So he was like finishing 11 p.m. And I went at 11 p.m. and he started showing me some recipes and stuff like that. Very, very simple stuff. And then I was like, I remember finishing that and I was like, should be more to it. Like this cannot be it. There should be more story. And then from there, I started just looking for courses, and I found a course in the capital, which was being held for the first time ever in Iran. It was for professionals, and it was run by a guy named Alan Atters. We're still friends. He's based in Ireland. He came from Ireland there to hold the course, and that was the first time that I tasted specialty coffee there, because we didn't have access to it at all, and I actually hated it first time. So I remember he pulled 3 shots of espresso, he put it in front of me, and he told me drink all of them and tell me which one you prefer. and I pointed it to the dark commercial roast
Commodity
because
coffee.
that was
Yes.
what I was used to. And then he was like, I saw it, the impression on his face when I say that. And he was so amazed that I was like, oh, there's so much I need to learn. And from that moment, that the learning started. And I started taking many different courses. I went to Turkey, to Dubai to learn more about coffee, took SCA courses. And then at some point, I became an SCA authorized trainer. And then I set it up a coffee school back in my home country. And that's how everything sort of started.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously skipping over some significant years and kind of, it didn't all just happen overnight. But what I suppose that there's a difference in someone like me who loves it and has a real passion for it, and I will try and source the best of the best that is available in the country. What was it for you that went, "Do you know what, I'm going to go and try and be the best at this and go and judge coffee, and we'll talk about your judging in a bit, but go and try and be the peak of this industry?" Because there's a big jump from having your first coffee to
Yeah.
kind of getting to where you are today.
To be honest, initially it was, I love talking about coffee, like, and I started in education because of that, because I love teaching everybody about what I knew and what I was learning. And I love sharing that knowledge. So it started with building that community around me of people I was teaching and people I was training. And then I really enjoyed the community aspects of it. I had a friend actually who used to say that a coffee, inside a coffee cherry, there are two beans facing each other, and that represent pretty much what coffee culture is two people talking. And
Like that.
it is so true. And I think that's the biggest aspect of it for me. And judging was another one which had community in its space. And through judging, I met a lot of people. I had the chance in 2018 to travel to many countries to judge competition and meet all of those coffee professionals and coffee lovers across the world. And from each one, I learned something new. So that's always have been the huge bit of it. And then I got to a point that because I was training in roasting, I was roasting coffee for myself. I was in contact with a lot of producers to find the best coffees that I was excited about
Yeah.
roasting them for myself. And then
Yeah.
I always wanted to be able to share that. And Etude is about that, pretty much.
Yeah. And we'll get into a lot of detail on that, but you just sparked a question that we'd certainly not prepped for, and I don't think I've asked it to anyone before, but um, I'm definitely not as well traveled as you. A lot of Europe, done Australia recently. I mean, the Australian coffee culture is incredible in terms of the quality, but do you think the UK has it wrong? Because if I think about the coffee culture of the UK, you walk into a coffee shop and it's students or workers sat with their headphones on their laptops. It's people kind of getting a takeaway cup. You go around Europe and you're in Amsterdam, you're in Italy. People are doing what you said. They're talking, they're laughing, they go to coffee to meet their friends. We have a big pub culture in the UK, and I think that's where we do
Yeah.
that side of it. How, from your travels and what you've seen, how does the UK coffee culture compare to what you've seen around the world?
I think the difference is UK had its own coffee culture, really, cafe culture, let's say,
Yes. Yeah.
compared to others. I think another country that's similar to that is Italy. Italy has had its culture for many years as well, same as UK. But like some of the countries are a bit more new to that. They didn't really have a specific culture, and the culture has shaped around the third favorite, fourth favorite coffee, which is all about taste and quality. And I think in that sense, it had made it a bit different because we have inherited some of the cafe culture that the UK had and still there. But I think in the recent years, like UK has made, there's a huge change in the market, the UK specifically in bigger cities, specifically London. They're really exciting and independent coffee shops coming up that when I go there and try the coffee, it's just amazing. It's as good as uh, some of the top coffee shops you go in Denmark or in Belgium or Germany or other countries
Yeah.
in
Yeah, I do see a lot of Scandinavian cafe culture coming into the UK now. We're seeing much more filter and batch brew kind of as a regular staple, which is great, rather than the milky stuff that we're very known
yeah.
for in the UK. And
Exactly. And when it comes to special coffee, we have really hubs of these specialty cafes.
Yep.
Like Copenhagen is one, Brussels is another one. There are cities like Berlin is a huge one that many of the early brands started there and expanded this culture. And I think London is one of them. So,
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's dive in because anyone watching will see I'm currently drinking one of your coffees. We're talking Ethiopia. So you recommended two to me to kind of pick up from the site. Anyone who ever recommends a Yoga Chef, I always get excited because it is definitely my favorite style and origin. Still to this day, I know Ethiopia maybe doesn't take it the same mantle it does anymore. In my opinion, it absolutely does. As far as coffee goes, why did you choose this one for me to have a try of whilst we're chatting?
I love every single coffee that we have, but I chose specifically those two because they're very, very different when it comes to the taste profile. They're not even remotely similar.
Nice.
But they both have really nice story behind it, that I wanted to share.
Yep.
And specifically Ethiopian, because I think recent years I've got feedback from sometimes talking to customers or potential customers. And when I mention Ethiopian, they're like, "Oh, Ethiopia is boring." It is
Yep.
not. It
It
is
is
the
nice.
origin of Arabica coffee. And I just wanted to have the chance to talk about Ethiopia and say, "Oh, these coffees coming from Ethiopia are amazing. We shouldn't get bored of Ethiopia. Ethiopia has so much to offer when it comes to specialty coffee."
Yeah, and it's looking at the kind of notes you put on. It's the first time I think I've seen the word jackfruit put on.
Yeah, that
But
was an interesting one when we came up with it. That was an interesting one because our marketing person, he was like, "No, we shouldn't put jackfruit. Jackfruit's not associated to fruity flavors, more associated to food like meat like flavor because if you got a meat substitute." But
yeah,
I think I was like, we should go for it because it exactly tastes like that. I don't know if you ever tasted fresh not
yeah,
jackfruit candies and stuff that you get. But a few years ago, I traveled to Malaysia and I had the chance to try all of the fresh fruits, which are amazing when they're fresh. Buy them there. And jackfruit was actually my favorite. Like I was eating jackfruit every day. And I was a bit surprised that they associated with specifically savory taste. I get it, but it's actually had this very specific fruity flavor. And I remember copying this coffee for the first time on a coffee table. I was like, oh my God, it just took me to that memory of that trip. And while I was having that fruit, and I was like, yeah, it is flavor note for that one.
yeah.
Uh,
I can't say I've ever had completely very fresh jackfruit, but if it tastes like this, I need to find it because honestly, the flavors. I mean, it's cooling down for me now, so it's getting really, really strong. And I mean, the jasmine notes are phenomenal. Like whenever someone says jasmine, I always really look for it. You don't need to in this. It's there. Certainly as it's cooling down. It's
yeah,
it's a really lovely standout coffee. So, what is the story? What's the story behind the sourcing of this? And we'll talk about your sourcing as well. But
yeah,
what's the story?
yeah. The story is very, very interesting because when I found the stuff, we already had an Ethiopian offering, which was from Sidama. It's still on our website. And well, usually roasters don't go with two copies at the same time from the same origin. But I have this friend, and he runs. He's an expert in plant medicine, and he runs spiritual plant focus ceremony. This is a field he works in, and he's really interested. And I met him a few months actually after finding this coffee, and he told me all about the Yirgacheffe coffee ceremony. And it's huge in Ethiopia, and it's specifically Yirgacheffe. And Yirgacheffe beings specifically are used for the spiritual ceremony that involves picking the beans, washing them, roasting them in a pan, and then brewing and serving to the crowd. And he was like, I really want to run this ceremony. Can you find me Yirgacheffe coffee? And I went ahead and I tasted. I started looking at what's available from Yirgacheffe this season. think we cupped something like maybe 15 different Yirgacheffe. And this stood out. This was very, very special. And yeah, I found a Yirgacheffe that he wanted to try and he wanted to use. He hasn't run the ceremony yet, uh, but we decided to use it as bring it out as a product because it was such a unique coffee. And and also it is a natural, and I'm a big fan of natural coffees. I know a lot of people are very like against natural. When you talk about natural, you might not sound serious about coffee, but I think a good natural, if it's done correctly, especially coffee that's done correctly, they have graded and sorted the coffee multiple times throughout the process, and they've maintained the consistency of the drying. A good natural can have all of the flavors and the brightness that potential wash can have, and on top of that, it can have an amazing sweetness that can back out all of those acidities. Which in this coffee we have that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. If I see the words Ethiopia and natural on the front of a coffee, I pump for it. Like I love it. Like especially like you said, if it's done right, and some of the conversations I'm going to have throughout this series are about bad coffee exists still, even in you can get a badly roasted Yirgacheffe. Like just you've done this very well, and it's the idea of the I want to put the spotlight on great roasters because I've had some very very badly treated coffees that are very similar, and it does my head in when you've got this amazing cherry and you've obliterated it with your roast style. How do you go about sourcing then? What's your kind of how do you get your coffee? How do you choose your coffee?
So there are a few importers that we work with. There are not many. There are less than five. We're very strict in who we work with because we want to make sure those importers work directly with the farmer and they reinvest into the farm as well and the livestock farm. For instance, Falcon is one of them. This coffee, this Ethiopian Yirgacheffe from Ethiopia, Peru, and other origins. And something that's amazing about them is they actually disclose how much they pay for this coffee to the farmer, which uh, gives us a lot more clarity on what is happening, how many middlemen there is. And it's very few with Falkland because they directly work to the farms. We would love to work directly with farmers, and we have in the past, but it's mostly for our limited collection because those are the coffees that we buy in a smaller amount. And being a small company means that it's to import coffee ourselves is not easy. It requires a lot of financial resource and other resources to be able to do that. So we only do it for limited collections, not for the other coffees we do, but we try to work with importers that we have a really good relationship with, and they do a lot of work in the origin. Another one that the Burundi will talk about is coming from is Raw Material. Again, they're a company that I know them for many years now. They did a project in Colombia in El Phoenix. They set up a processing station. I was involved in that. I invested in that actually, and they named the tree after me
Nice.
as part of that process. So, there is a very long-term relationship with these, and I'm very proud.
I'm sure it goes without saying, but how important is it to have them relationships? Because, especially with climate change, with seasons, with everything going wrong in a lot of countries and a lot of origins, having them relationships surely more important than ever to make sure when you are having a crop that maybe has only delivered 30% of what it should, that you can still get your hands on it, still do
Yeah,
it. But
yeah, yeah.
how important are the relationships for you?
Extremely important, I would say, because the right importers are very active in the origin. They're copying samples all the time. They know what coffee we're after. So this as soon as they find something interesting, they will think of us and get us involved, and that's extremely helpful and important. It's not just a relationship of buyer seller. Oh, what do you have on offer? We're gonna buy this. No, it's a more long-term relationship because you have a coffee right now. Coffee finishes. It's a product that is not there. Coffee, this Ethiopian, there's a limited amount of it. Next crop is going to taste different. So we're always looking, obviously, to replace that product. And they know that our audience are used to the 5, 6 different ranges of flavors. And we have audience for each of them. So if when we replace it, we try to replace it with something within the same realm,
Yep. Yep.
a bit different, but not too different. So, and that relationship guarantees that, because they will send a sample to speak that they think is similar, and we'll always stop and we make the final decision. Yeah. But we had crops of the same coffee from different years that been hugely different. And for example, we didn't use a new crop and we switched in on the coffee. So it's always like we have to cup everything. We have to roast everything, cup everything ourselves.
Yeah. And how much is obviously you're not working on the farms, but from your side of it, how much is climate affecting this industry? And from
I
what you
think
know,
that's the biggest thing right now because we've recently had the biggest spike in coffee market price, and that's mainly because of climates, because of the drought in Brazil and in Vietnam. And it's, well, the price, everybody probably knows it because it's everywhere on the news. The coffee prices have gone up pretty much by 50 to 40%. Climate is a huge thing. And I think the way, with the climate change, we're going to, universities are looking at new varieties, botanical gardens are looking at new varieties, what can be done. Origin countries have invested a lot on see what can be done because it would be in the future that certain areas and regions that are currently great for cultivating coffee, they wouldn't be. And that's the reality of it. So we'll see what comes in the next few years, but we're already seeing this happening.
yeah. And I suppose there was a big part of me 6 to 8 months ago when you're going on roasters shops, you're going online, you're looking and you're seeing very different origins to what they maybe used to produce. Now, the optimist in me would say, great, they're exploring new places. But do you think that is because, we're seeing it in beer. We're seeing it massively in beer. Hop farms are being decimated by the weather. Well, they're having to look at different countries and different ways of sourcing hops. Is it largely due to that and people have to look elsewhere because we're just not getting the crops used to from the big boys? When Brazil is struggling, the coffee industry struggles. um, so are roasters looking at where else are doing things quite cool and interesting, do you think?
And yes, some. I know some roasters are bigger ones are already looking into countries like Nicaragua and other countries that are produce lower cost coffee to replace what Brazil has to offer. Because what Brazil offers, this is a product that is on the lower end of the price that we mainly use for our blends as the base to create the body and the chocolate nut flavor that everybody loves in coffee. So already roasters I think are looking at that, but I think it's going to be very, very difficult to replace what Brazil has to offer. The main reason is it just Brazil taste profile is very specific to that country and that region.
Yeah.
Uh,
And a lot of people without knowing it are very used to it. Because it is so widely used.
absolutely, yeah. I think this goes without saying. The most popular coffees, the best-selling coffees, even within especially roasteries, are the blends.
Yeah.
And the blends are between 70 to 90% Brazil.
Yeah.
That's the truth. People love coffee with milk, right? Most of the coffee we sell in our coffee shops are milk-based drinks, and people prefer a chocolatey, nutty coffee in milk compared to coffee that has a lot of. That's why we create blends.
Compared to the coffee I've just poured, which is your Burundi, which has absolutely no chocolate or nutty notes to it. That's just like punched me in the face. Like, I've deliberately not tried this ahead of it. I tried the Yoga Chef and I've been brewing that most of the week, but I wanted to be surprised by this because I always am from anything that comes out of Burundi. It's always Very, very different. And we'll come on to talk about it in a second. But so your approach to roasting as a roaster, and what I want to do this series is a lot of people, the education around the beer industry, and the reason I keep saying beer, I might not, but this is a beer and coffee podcast. We talk to brewers, we talk to roasters. I'm not just an alcoholic that likes talking about beer and prefers everything to beer. But I think it's quite well known now how the brewing process works, and everyone knows how a beer is made and the ingredients that go into beer. I still think there is a lack of public education in general about the whole coffee process, from sourcing through to roasting through to getting it in your cup in your cafe. So what's your approach to roasting? How do you do it? Have you got a specific type of roast that you like doing? Are you light, are you dark, or do you mix it up? What's your approach?
So, throughout the years of learning about roasting and teaching about roasting, I've had different approaches. But the ultimate uh, sort of point I am right now is I really believe there is an ultimate sweet spot for each coffee. There is one roast that is the perfect roast, no matter what brewing method you use. It might be a bit controversial because a lot of roasteries have espresso roast and have filter roast. If we even do that, we have coffees and roasts that we wouldn't recommend for espresso. Uh, I think you can brew any roast, even if it's not dark, correctly using espresso if you have the right equipment and the right skill. Because at the end of the day, it's a brewing method. You have control over three variables, which is time, temperature, and turbulence. And change that, you can extract more or less. The more you extract, the more of the specific compounds end up in your cup. But I think not everybody have access to the right equipment or the right knowledge. And that's why I think espresso roasts exist. Because espresso roast is a slightly darker usually, makes the coffee a lot more soluble, a lot easier to extract. And because of that, it is a lot easier to work with it when it comes to espresso. So yes, we have coffees that we recommend for both. Most of our roasts are omni roasts, but there are specific coffees that we wouldn't recommend for espresso because just we know extracting the right espresso from it would be very, very difficult. And Burundi is actually one of them. I wouldn't recommend it for espresso. You understand why I would.
I would be dialing this in for most of the back, I think, if I was trying to get this perfect. And it's
Yeah.
so nice. But yeah, and I've been transparent at the start, just for every single roaster that I'm just doing AeroPress this year and trying a couple of different recipes. It's the easiest way. It's what everyone can do at home. We want to be as accessible as possible. But yeah, I think I'd struggle with this one, and I'm pretty good at dialing in. It's so punchy. Talk to me about this one then. Why have we chose it? And for anyone, and I hear it all the time saying all coffee tastes the same. When you drink two coffees like that back to back, I get a little bit wired because it's lovely and I'm drinking great coffee. But like you said, these are two stark opposite coffees, like completely different. This is really heavy on the red berries, like you put on the front. I love the black tea notes that are in there. But what's the story here? And why did you
Yeah.
choose this one?
So it has that base of black tea, and it also has red berries, but it also, for me, has a bit of red grape flavor as well, which we didn't put on the pack because we were not getting it in every single brew. So you might get it or not. So it puts in a very different fruity uh, spectrum compared to Ethiopian Jägerschap, because Ethiopian Jägerschap with very tropical fruit, floral, and then the base is actually chocolate, chocolate and caramel and those sort of flavors rather than black tea. Uh, so the, this is one of the reasons I chose it because it's just so different to Ethiopia. Another reason is again the story behind it. This Burundi coffee comes from raw material. Raw material are again one of my favorite importers. They are a not-for-profit company, and they reinvest everything they make back into the farm. Any profit they make. This coffee specifically comes from a group of farms. I think it's I've written it down here. It's 454 female farmers, specifically in Burundi. So it showcases the women empowerment in coffee in Burundi. And I think it's a wash. And they've done it really well.
Mhm.
It's one of those wash coffees that they've done it really, really well. It's very clean, extremely clean. It's very bright. And for us, it was very easy to roast because the processing was done really well. Uh, they do multiple sorting throughout the process. They use a machine to sort initially, and then I think they do another three manual sorting throughout the whole process for fermentation, after fermentation. So a lot of work has gone into processing on
Mhm.
this one. And I want to showcase it because processing is a big topic these days. There's all of the new experimental processes, which I agree and disagree with. We don't have many of them. We have some experimental processing coffees in our limited collection, but I think it's very, very important because processing has become important, and the importance of older processing methods like washed and natural are kind of being overlooked because I firmly believe if they're done right, they can produce amazing coffees. And if an experimental process is done wrong, if the coffee tastes too much, and it just destroys all of the work that has been done before that and the character of that origin. And that's something I don't think anyone wants to see.
Yeah, and I had, and I think I mean the industry as a whole has always been quite nerdy and geeky, I think, in a good way. And we yeah we do nerd out over coffee. But I was drinking. I can't remember where it was from. I think it was Colombia. Yeah, it was Colombia, but it was carbonic maceration. I'm seeing carbonic maceration a lot now, kind of coming through. And when I was looking at the recipe for it, you had to be so specific with your ppm, and they were recommending what you do with the water to extract the flavor. And I was like, I just want to brew it like a normal human being. I think, like you said, this experimental style is becoming you kind of can't just brew it as a normal human because to get the flavor out. And fair play to the roasters for being so specific and wanting to do more with it. But if we're going to turn the majority of people on specialty coffee, it's the naturals, it's the washed, that's what we need to put back in front of people, in my opinion. And it is controversial because it's great to see experimental stuff, but I've seen it done very
I,
wrong.
I think it's great, but I think the most important thing for me is when I'm copying higher end coffees, which are usually experimental processing, I want to taste that origin. If I don't taste that origin, I'm I'll be like, this is too much. We need to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, and especially when price was a big thing we talked about last week on the podcast with the Harmony guys, and I think we talked about the Suez Canal for about half an hour on how the Suez Canal has impacted price. But these experimental methods as well tend to attract a higher price of the coffee, and if it isn't good, you are going to lose your consumer very quickly. But anyway, enough. I'm going to piss off half the industry if I start talking about experimental stuff and how I'm not a fan yet. I will be convinced. So what? From your perspective, you've judged coffees, you've drank thousands and thousands of coffees around the world. If you had to pinpoint, and I hate asking people to do it, an origin or a region or a coffee that has stood out to you the most, if that was do you know what, I can only drink one coffee again. Have you got any of them? Like, I have it with beer where I have like an epiphany beer where I say, if I could only do one, it'd be that. Is there anything in your experience that has just stood out way above anything else you've drank?
Very difficult question to be honest, because I've drank many different coffees from different countries, and I was amazed on how good they were. Like I can tell you recently what I've tasted and I love. It was one was a coffee from Peru, which was roasted actually by especially roastery in France.
Okay.
I think Placid Roastery.
Yep. Yep.
And it was a geisha from Peru. Geisha is a very new variety for Peru that they're experimenting with. So, as you probably know, it's a very difficult variety to grow. It's absolutely beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful geishas I ever tasted. And then another one is actually our Brazil. So you usually associate Brazil with chocolatey, nutty coffees, but we currently have Brazil come from a region called Pau Brazil, and it's extremely fruity. It's insane. When you pull a espresso shot from it, it's just so stone fruity and have that chocolate as well. Beautiful. So these are the two that probably recently I've tasted and I was like, this is special.
By chance, is the Peruvian, the Julio Chavez from Placid. Do you know? Do you remember?
Yes, yes.
I've got it in the kitchen. I've still yet to try it. So now you set the expectation for that. You've set it very high. I've been letting that sit for a little while, but
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to getting into that now. Probably not going to have it today. I've had enough. But no, that's good to hear.
Just to further answer your question, all time
Yeah,
favorite, I probably would think how many amazing coffees I tasted from that country region,
yeah.
and I think it should be Panama.
Right. You are not the first person and first roaster to have said that country. Um, yeah, amazing place. I think for me, it's what's your opinion on China and Chinese coffees now? Because they seem to be gaining in popularity. We're seeing some really interesting flavors come out of China. Have you roasted anything yet from
No,
what's
we haven't roasted anything from China yet. I've tasted some coffees from China, some of them through the subscriptions I am part of, and some in competitions. They're very, very interesting coffees. Specifically, Brewers Cup 2 years ago in the UK, I had a coffee from China, which was really, really interesting. But I had also coffees that are not so interesting from China.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
definitely a region we want to get to. I want to get more samples on, but we haven't focused on it a lot. It's definitely worth focusing on.
Yeah, when I used to run coffee tasting mornings where we'd have two or three coffees, everyone would be pumped for the rest of the day. And I always got really excited when I managed to get a great Chinese coffee in. And like you said, sometimes there is nothing to it. There's nothing there. There's no flavour. It's really disappointing. But and it commands such a price. But yeah, it's an interesting origin. So I want to talk about your business and Etude and kind of the locations you've got and everything that it stands for now. Where does the name come from? What did you choose? Is it a musical reference or is it a blend of stuff? How did you come up with the name of the business?
So a two name comes from my passion for music and art, specifically classical music.
Yeah.
So as you probably know, etude generally in art is a form of art you will do before coming up with a concept for the main work. In classical music, it's a piece of music usually written to showcase skill and what you want to do and what capabilities you have, for example, on a piano. Uh, and when I was starting Etude, I actually went through a practice that I chose a lot of names and I sent out this questionnaire to all the friends and people I knew, and I asked to vote, and one name came to the top. It wasn't Etude. Etude wasn't even on that list. I'm not going to tell you that name because someone might go and use it, or uh, they might say it was better or whatever. But one day I was listening to an etude by Chopin. I just thought it's just time that came to my mind that this is a perfect name because this is sort of what I'm doing with coffee. I'm finding these coffees and trying to make them perfect. The result is never going to be perfect. We can always improve the roast. We can always find more interesting coffees. But we are doing a study around coffee, and that's literally in French in study. So
Yeah.
that's why it's
I
called.
love it, and I can't even remember if I briefed you, but we have our Brew Odyssey podcast playlist, and I'm going to take some songs from you at the end to go into it. I don't know if I briefed you on this at all, so this is going to come as fresh news towards the end. Okay, you're going to have to think on your feet for this. Um, talk to me about your two locations, then. So I assume we started with the space in Norfolk, and then you've kind of moved into London. But what can people expect from coming to Norfolk? Because that is your roastery, right? That's not just that's
Yes.
a cafe. That's where all the work and the magic happens.
Yeah.
How do you describe the space? Because it looks like an incredible space, and you're in is it a
Yes.
1950s mill, I think. So
Yes.
what can people expect from that space if they turn up, and what makes it
Uh,
special?
so as you mentioned, it's 1950s old silo building. It's a very interesting building. It's all built by concrete, and it's a huge building in the middle of nowhere. Like you pass it and you'll be surprised why there's this building here. And we try to keep keep it authentic and don't change it too much. So you literally, when you enter, you inside an industrial building that's concrete, very brutal its architecture, and there's a coffee bar, and then you see a coffee roaster at the back. And that's how you probably know you're in a place that is serious about coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they just they have the roaster there. A lot of people, when they enter first time, they just stunned by the building and the space because it's a very high ceiling, and the space is big and people randomly sitting in different places having a coffee. So I think it's a special space specifically for where we are. You don't see anything like it.
Yeah. And then why London for the next shop? Because it's an expensive city to set up shop in. But what made you make that London move?
So I always wanted to be present in the London market as especially coffee brand because the sort of audience we have in London is very different to the countryside. Countryside are they prefer more classic tasting coffees. It's a bit more difficult to work on experimental, for example, processing coffees that are super fruity. They have very specific character. So I wanted to get to the London market just to be able to showcase those as well, because I love those coffees too. And the opportunity came up because an old friend and colleague of mine, who shut down his shop in the pandemic, his name is Myrtle, he was looking to open a new shop. And then I said, why don't we do it together? And that kind of formed the London shop. He's an amazing barista. He's an amazing coffee professional. And I was really invested. I was like, this is the best person to showcase what we're doing with Etude here. And that's why we started London, and Crystal Palace specifically was a very interesting location because it has that sort of audience and crowd. But it is not as expensive as City. And it was also very close to where Myrtle lives in South London. So we're like, that's the location. And it just sort of happened in a month, the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine I'd be very disappointed if they weren't, but in both locations you have either highly skilled, highly trained, or highly knowledgeable baristas working for you. You don't let anyone at your coffee. So, how do you go about? I'm not talking about your recruitment strategy, but do you work with your baristas? Do you impart your knowledge, or are they kind of
Yes.
recruited because
So
they have great experience?
yeah, so it's a combination of that and education. Again, I mentioned education is my passion, and it is our strength in the truth because we run SA courses, we run coffee lover courses and everything. So when we recruit people, actually for the roastery, mostly we recruit people with not a lot of coffee background and knowledge, and we train them to become amazing baristas. Same thing is happening in London. Merdol is running that. And I think that's a strength because we build teams we just find people that are passionate about learning about coffee. And that's it. That's all you need to have. And then we'll teach you. And because of that, when you go to any of the shops, you talk to any of our baristas, they're really passionate about what they're doing. They know about the coffee. They can talk coffee to you the whole day if you want.
Yeah. It's easier to train people to be good than retrain bad habits, I always say.
Absolutely true.
Um, so it's always useful for my listeners who all kind of are home brewers. They'll have any form of home brewing, whether that be an espresso machine. What if you were to give 3 tips on getting the most out of, because people are spending more on coffee now. If you're spending 15, 20, 25 pounds on a bag of great coffee, how would you say at home you can get the best out of it? What would be your top tips for making sure you're not wasting that 250 gram bag of coffee?
Uh, what I would do, like for myself, is rather than experimenting with a lot of different brewing processes, focus on one and just brew it differently 3 or 4 times on the same brewing method, same probably volume, and then you get to try different extractions of that coffee, which will give you a lot of insight into how that coffee tastes. This is what we do at the roastery when we want to choose a coffee because we want to see everything that coffee has to offer. And that's why we do cupping because you're brewing it over time for 20 minutes to get to taste everything. That's how I do it at home. One coffee, just one brewing method, and experiment a lot with that. Because all of the brewing methods sort of do the same thing. They extract coffee, yeah, a bit differently, but at the end of the day, you should be able to achieve uh, different extraction, different taste profiles with the same brewing method by changing three variables: time, temperature, and temp.
Have you got a preferred method yourself?
Not really. When I change coffee, I usually change brew method as well,
Makes
just
sense.
to try something new. I've got Chemex at home, I've got Aeropress, I've got Alita and V60 as well. But if I have to choose one, I'll actually choose Jet Vapor. Uh, that's very interesting to me because of my background and because I judge a competition, and it's very, very unique. It also gives you a lot of because it's a full immersion, but coffee is very fine. It You have a lot of control over extraction, and you can extract a lot of sweetness from the coffee. That's why I love
Yep.
it.
Yep. Good. There you go, guys. There's a tip for you. Just stick with one. And I do the same, to be fair. I go through a month or two at a time where I'll stick with the V60. I'll happily do it. And then I remember, go on, let's give filter a go. And you realize how, yes, they are very similar, but how different the profile can be. So, yeah, it makes it a lot easier on the washing up if you're just using one rather than jumping about between these. Talk to me about last bit on your business, on the branding, the artwork. Where does the inspiration come from? The artwork that's on your packets? Because I mean, I just love it. Like the simplistic nature. You've got the brandy there for anyone
Yeah.
who hasn't seen it. You've got the colours and the style. Where does all that come from? Is it you? Are
So
you an artist as well?
no, no, it's not. It's Tom. He's our marketing person, and he's very, very talented. He's actually not a designer. He has recently gone into this. We had another designer previously that we were working with, and our designs were very different. And then we had a limited range, which the designs were some of her paintings, and they're similar to what it is now. So we really loved those. And because it was her painting, she couldn't just paint a new painting and do it. So I went to Tom and we were like, can you get inspired by these design and create something? And he got into it and he got really interested in it actually. He's like really working on becoming a designer now, and he does these, and we go forth and back. When we talk about coffee, when we try to come up with a design, we usually taste that coffee together, and then we all think about the color. It's an interesting approach. So we'll taste this and we're like, all say pink or red.
Mm,
And then he
interesting.
goes and he gets inspired, and in that color theme, he comes up with an abstract design.
Like it. As a marketeer, that I might start doing that. Just think of a color and then run with it. It's just I like that. So yeah, we've only got 10 more minutes to kind of chat things through, but I wanted to pick your brains on. There are a lot of roasters opening and a lot of independent roasters opening. It seems like we're having a little bit of a renaissance period in the UK and across the world. Like, we talked about France a minute ago. France has been behind the curve for a while, and you're seeing these incredible roasters open up over there and in a lot of different countries. How do you, as an individual in a business, stay ahead of the trends and the curves? Because we talked about experimental methods. There will be shifts in what we see in the next few years, especially as the climate changes again. But you have a love for it, you have a passion. So I'm sure even when you're not roasting or drinking, you're thinking about coffee or learning it and researching it. But how do you stay ahead of what's to come in the market?
Be honest, it's very, very difficult because it's moving really, really fast. Every day there's a new equipment, there's a new processing, there's a new roastery. What we do, rather than focusing on that side and trying to keep track of what roasters open and stuff, which I'll do, I usually do that through subscriptions that I have, so I receive from different roasteries and I taste them. But what we focus on is our end customer. And that's why we have the coffee shops in two very different locations and hopefully
Yes.
more in the future. So we have in our coffee shops, if you go, we always have a community. It's not just a coffee shop, you go and have a coffee. You go have a coffee and have a chat with the barista. That's our culture. And because of that, we have direct relationship with a lot of people that drink our coffee, and we always get their feedback and we try to understand what they're after and what they enjoy about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we we go and try to do what's best in that sense, rather than trying to follow a specific trend in the industry.
So I want you to kind of not sit on any kind of fence this, but what are your predictions for the industry over the next year or two? If you were to make two or three bold predictions on what we're seeing, either from my side as a consumer of coffee or your side as a business owner within it, where do you think the changes are going to come if you were to put some predictions on it?
I think two things will happen. Uh, the most important one is because of the increase in coffee prices, now the bigger brands have to increase their prices, like Starbucks and Costa. I think that's actually a good thing for specialty coffee industry, because when people start paying more for a cup of coffee, they would want a better quality product. And that's what we've been doing. Uh, but we just, with the same price.
Yeah.
And now because the Starbucks price is high as well, more customers will probably go to specialty coffee shops, which is a good thing. There's a flip side to that, and that's just generally people drinking less coffee, going to coffee shop less, and just drinking at home, which can happen. Uh, uh, so I see that happening. Another thing that I think would happen is coffee shops need to do more than just selling coffee to become sustainable. A lot of coffee shops has already started that, getting into alcohol area, craft beer, high-end wine, cocktails, coffee cocktails, other cocktails. So we see more and more coffee shops being open throughout the evening to serve alcoholic drinks. I think that will happen because they're already using that space, they're paying for that space, so why not make more revenue from it? Also, been more focused probably on food items, because at the end of the day, average sale is what a coffee shop operates on, and because coffee price is going up, people are going to probably drink less coffee. Now we have to focus on other things to make our business sustainable.
Yeah, again, very similar to what the beer industry did with tap rooms and kind of having that end consumer product rather than just a brewery. But do you see any of the big boys or any of the significant players switching blends up to Robusta at all and bringing Robusta into their arsenal, with that still being a bit cheap? I know there was a couple of years ago there were big predictions that people were going to start swapping it out. You've got the rise of Black Sheep Coffee as a very big high street brand that are kind of championing good Robusta coffee. But do you see that entering the specialty world at all?
I I haven't seen that in specialty world yet. There was talks of it a lot a year ago. Uh, but I think because the Robusta price spiked as well, now it's off the topic because of the drought in Vietnam, the
Yep.
Robusta price spiked at the same time. Now there's a talk of Liberica and other
Hmm.
species of coffee that are more rust resistant and resistant to disease. But that's still at in botanical gardens and university. It hasn't gone to the origins yet.
So I want to get onto your music choices, and then we'll round up with what's next for Etude. So I always ask every week. So we have a playlist. It's for every roaster and every brewer. They have to put 3 songs in. It gets to about 10 episodes in, and it's the most eclectic playlist I believe on the internet because everyone has very different tastes and styles. And I really should have prepared you because I'm going to put you on the spot here. But I always want you to go back to your either kind of high school or university days and give me a song that kind of takes you back there, so back home, I suppose. A song that is your perfect kind of either roasting song or zen song if you just listen drinking great coffee. Like, what's that song that comes into your mind if you're just drinking great coffee? What would you like to listen? And then just something random that no one else is going to put into it. So something pretty, something that you love that's going to go into that playlist. So I'll let you take it in any order. And you've got very little time to think about it, but it just gives a little flavour into it. And we had a really interesting chat last week in the first episode with Harmony, who have started doing coffee and music pairing sessions, which are so cool. Like the idea that coffee can be paired with music, and I love the fact that we're tying it together. But talk to me about music. You say it's had a big influence on your life, especially classical, and you love music. So what are you going to bring to the table for us to put in the playlist?
Yeah, difficult one. It's definitely one at the top of the list because that's the piece I was listening to when I chose the name, and that is the Revolutionary Etude by Chopin. That would be the first one. It's not a very calming piece, but I think it is like some of the coffees you would drink.
Yeah,
It's very special. Uh,
like it.
But
It's in.
if I go back to my childhood, the piece that got me really interested in classical music, and the first cassette I had was Four Seasons by Vivaldi. That's another one. It's very nature focused uh, piece, and very calming and very therapeutic. I think it's perfect listen with a cup of coffee. And then for the last one, it's a difficult one because I want to choose something that's not classical. Uh, I would probably go with Led Zeppelin, 10 Years Gone. This is the random one.
That's very different. I like it. I like that a lot. We've already got 6 unique songs in this playlist. I'm only 2 episodes in. I love it. I love this part of the show. Um, so I suppose the sales pitch, the one chance you get to sell. What's next for you? Where do you see the business in the next year? Where do you want to take it? And then, really importantly, how can people get hold of your coffee if they've been interested in what we're talking about? And I suppose attend a workshop. Like, basically give us everything. What's coming up? Where can people
Yeah.
get stuff? What's next?
There is three areas we want to focus. I go with the simple one. We just want to grow wholesale more and be more present in different businesses. The second one is we want to open more shops to be able to represent our coffee well and serve our coffee well to the end user and have more contact with the end user. And the third one, which is an interesting one, I'm currently sort of writing down the business model for it and the project plan, is a coffee club. Because now we've got these locations and community is very, very important for me. I want to launch a coffee club that is not only a subscription to experimental roast and coffees, but also gives you access to events around coffee, socializing event and networking event in both of our shops as well. So that's something that will come up. And all of this information will always be on our Instagram and specifically on our website. So if your listeners would like to try our coffee or learn more about us, I would direct them to our website, which is Etude.
Easy. Easy done. I've really enjoyed that episode. That was a great chat. Is there
Thank
anything
you.
else at all
Likewise.
that you wanted to add about the coffee world? This is your one chance to throw it out there, or have we covered it all?
No, I just want to thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed this chat. And I also want to thank our amazing team, for the team of really talented baristas and coffee professionals that are behind Etude, and they're amazing. I'm really proud of them. So I want to thank them.
Well, thanks for joining me, Amir. And yeah, well, I've got some incredible episodes coming up in the next few weeks. I'm recording back to back. We've got some coffee experts. We've finally got our first beer episode. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe. But until next time, this has been the Brew Odyssey.
Absolutely. Thank you and looking